one. So if you agree with me that this is work that is important to HP, and you have a security-related project where you think you can use it, contact me and I'll put you in touch with Marc. I'm Alan Karp, and alan.karp@hp.com is the way you get a hold of me. Okay, so let's get started.
Hi, I'm Marc Miller of HP Labs, M-A-R-K-M at hpl.hp.com. I've worked with Marc Stiegler many times on many different projects, including most recently on the system that you'll see described. Marc Stiegler did the capability secure desktop that he'll be describing. The whole thing runs on top of the distributed secure programming language E, which is the work of myself and others. And the two together bring out one security paradigm through both of those levels. And as Marc will be explaining the properties of it.
Okay, thank you. The topic of this talk, I realized that I went on Sunday to go see Terminator 3. Now, I used to have a talk about security and the really fundamental flaw in all of the security approaches that are taken traditionally today. But when I saw Terminator 3, I suddenly realized that this movie really exemplifies the problem that we have. And so I have changed my talk to take advantage of this topical matter. My apologies to anyone for whom I have spoiled the ending. The bad news is we lose. Okay. And we lose because of our security. So with that, let's go on. Okay, and really the bulk of my presentation here is about the principle of least authority, also referred to as the principle of least privilege. I call it POLA because I talk about it a lot. Principle of least privilege is a term that you can use only if you're not going to take it seriously and you can afford to spend 8 syllables talking about the term, and so you're not going to talk about it very often. But POLA, in case we've got anybody here who's not familiar with security, POLA is actually a security principle that is thousands of years old. I was recently talking with H.G. Wells, who just got back in his time machine from a visit to 50,000 years ago, where he actually met the inventor of the principle of least authority. This principle was first invented by a mother of 2 children, a 3-year-old boy and a 6-month-old daughter. They were living in a cave with the husband, and one day the husband came home and laid his club down on the floor of the cave. And the 3-year-old boy ran over, grabbed up the club, and ran over to start beating the 6-month-old daughter. Okay. Now, the mother had several choices at this point. She could allow the boy to beat the daughter, or she could take the club away from the boy and beat the boy with the club. But what she did instead of either of these things was she picked up the club and put it on a ledge high enough up off the ground so that the 3-year-old child could no longer reach it. Okay? And that's the principle of least authority. Don't give them any authority that they don't need, either people or programming objects. So, the principle of least authority, how does that apply to Terminator 3 and to the real world of today? Well, Terminator 3 sums it up quite nicely. They show us the last POLA violation that humanity ever gets to make. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, there's a congressman on the phone speaking to General Brewster about a super virus that has started that is not only infecting all the industrial sites of the world, but has started to invade the military sites. Congressman, if you activate SkyNet, it can destroy this super virus, right? Brewster, yes. But while it is activated, it will control all of our nuclear missiles. Congressman, but you will control SkyNet, right? Now, at this point, Brewster pauses for a long time. And then he says, yes. There's a couple of problems here. The first one is that Brewster lied. Once a program gets its hands on an authority, oh, you don't have control over it anymore. That puppy runs way too fast and way too silently for you to have any clue what he's doing. And the second problem, of course, is that General Brewster's software architects failed him with respect to POLA, in that, did you really need to give SkyNet control of the nuclear missiles in order to get rid of the virus? This seems like a really fundamental breach of the principle. Okay. Now, all of us in security actually give the principle of least privilege, POLA, a lot of lip service. When we're standing there at the, standing around the coffee machine, we talk about the principle of least privilege. But then we go back to our desks and we start using things like firewalls. Firewalls follow the principle of least functionality for the user. Access control lists, which follow the principle of least easy to memorize password. And certificates. Certificates are my favorite because, of course, they don't impose any restrictions at all. I have here, as an example, I just went out to Google and said, hey, give me an example of an ActiveX control. And it came out and it gave me one. Do you want to install and run live math distributed by Theorist Interactive? I don't know who Theorist Interactive is. I don't know what live math is. But what I do know is that this sentence, do you want to install and run, is actually not exactly telling you the entire truth. What it's really, okay, if I was going to rewrite that line, what I would say is, do you want to give total control over all of your data and your user account and all of your authority to the most psychologically unstable member of the development team for live math? Okay? Because that's really what you're doing when you say yes on one of these puppies. The reason why that is true is that there is so much ambient authority laying around on our computers for our applications to pick up. Every time you start the stupidest little program, it comes up with all of your authority. The Solitaire program, if you start up Solitaire on your computer, it comes up with the authority to read every confidential document on your computer, sell it on eBay to the highest bidder, and then delete it off your computer. This is madness. How can anyone be surprised that we have security problems? Now, nobody's really ever had any problem, to my knowledge, with all that authority that Solitaire has. Solitaire, so far, to the best of our knowledge, has never abused that authority. However, the fundamental truth here is, if you constantly give out excess authority, you're guaranteed that eventually it will be abused, quite possibly by the next email attachment that you double-click on. In the movie T3, the moment when we realize that the authority is about to be abused is the moment when John Connor says to General Brewster, SkyNet is the virus. Oh, no. Okay, my current favorite example of something that abuses its excessive authority on my own computer is Yahoo Instant Messenger. I'm really happy that Yahoo Instant Messenger has the authority to connect me to the person that I want to instant message with. I am not so happy that Yahoo Instant Messenger on my computer has the authority to go out to some Yahoo site and find some Yahoo advertisement and some great thing about new upgrades that they have with new features that I don't want, okay, and display that to me every time I turn the thing on. Okay, classic abuse of an authority. So what's the solution to the problem of all of this excess ambient authority just laying around? The ambient authority, by the way, is going back 50,000 years, a club laying on the ground on the floor of the cave is ambient authority, right? Anybody can just pick it up and use it for any foolish purpose they desire. Well, the solution is don't give out authority by default. Eliminate the ambient authority. There's no default authority. Things come to life with no authority at all. And then, over the course of time, you give them the authority that they need. Now, at this point, people typically say, aha, I gotcha. I know why this is not possible. It's not possible because then, to be able to get any work done, you'd be spending all of your time granting authority. You got to grant authority for this, and you got to grant authority for that. And you go on and on. You spend half the day clicking on checkboxes saying, yes, okay, I'll allow him to do that. And if I was going to develop a programming system that proved that this could not possibly work, what I would have done is I would have invented Java Web Start. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever seen Java Web Start, but it does exactly what I just said. When you open a dialog box on the text editor under Java Web Start, and you pick a file to edit, when it closes the dialog box, on the open file dialog box, it immediately goes ahead and opens up another dialog box. This one's the security dialog box, which says, this program is trying to access this file. Do you want to give it the authority to access this file? When I showed this to my 12-year-old daughter, my 12-year-old daughter said, Daddy, why doesn't it know that it has the authority to access this file? I just told it in the open file dialog box. Okay. So what's the solution to this problem so brilliantly exemplified by Java Web Start? And the solution is bundle the authority with the designation. Okay? We spend all of our lives on our computers designating things that we want to work on using a wide variety of user interface techniques that have been evolved over man-centuries of effort and decades of time. We use file dialogues, we use the drag-drop metaphor, double-click to launch. We have many designation mechanisms. And if, when we do a designation, we send not merely the designation of what it is we want to work on, but the authority to work on it at the same time, then all of a sudden, the designation that we're doing anyway is now performing our security activities, and it disappears from view. As we'll see in the demo of the CAT Desk Capability Secure Desktop later, there are no security-oriented dialog boxes, and yet this desktop is quite invulnerable to traditional Trojan horses and computer viruses. So with this just standard file dialog box, what you want to really be able to do to combine designation with authority in contravention to what Java Web Start does is if you pick something in that dialog box, when you double click on it and what the program should get back is not the name of the file, but the file handle and the authority to operate on that file. Now, there are three different things that one really needs to have at the same time here in the age of the internet. And with traditional techniques, you only are able to get 2 out of the 3. And indeed, it is the common mythological wisdom that only 2 of the 3 can ever be attained. There's usability, power, and security. You want all 3 of those in your applications at the same time, all of the time. Java has, once again, done the best job of exploring all 3 edges of the triangle. I was just talking about Java Web Start, which is actually powerful and actually secure within limits, but it is quite unusable. Java Applets, which were the original basis for all of the excitement about Java, Java Applets are quite usable, and they're pretty secure, but they're completely impotent. You cannot save a file. You can work on, if you brought up an applet that had a very powerful spreadsheet, and you built the most powerful spreadsheet model in history, oops, you can't have a save button on the thing. Finally, Java applications are quite usable and quite powerful, but like applications written in C and Smalltalk and every other language, they're quite insecure. Okay, so at that point, we'll be seeing all of these kinds of application-level applications of the principle of least authority in the demo later. But what I'd like to do now is go even deeper. Simply applying the principle of POLA at the application level might be enough to stop SkyNet. It would certainly be enough to stop all of the traditional computer viruses that we have today. But we can do better, and we ought to, because SkyNet someday is going to be a very serious threat. So let's talk about POLA inside the application. There are 2 aspects to fine-grained authority, and normally we only think about one of those 2 aspects, which is the fineness of the granularity of the resource being accessed, an individual file. Do you get append authority and delete authority? These are fine-grained decisions about the authority that we're getting on the resource. But the other side is the fineness of the granularity of the client who is receiving that authority. The typical operating system of today, Unix or Windows or NT, ends at the user level. The individual human being in his account is the lowest level of granularity at which authority is granted. Java and .NET do a little bit better. They at least try to do authority grants specific to an individual application. But let's talk about going all the way down to the level of the individual object. If you have a subroutine or an object whose sole purpose in life is to compute the square root of a number, why should it have all of the authority of the application? You know, the subroutine in Solitaire that is in charge of drawing a card on the screen also has all the authority to read all of your confidential documents and sell them on eBay to the highest bidder. This doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense, let me skip here, because the most common way for computer attacks to take place today is that a cracker comes into a program that was written by perfectly honorable programmers, but they find a bug which happens to be exploitable as a security breach. And through that bug, they're able to go out and use all of those program authorities, which, you know, with Solitaire is God's authorities. So how do we avoid this, this disaster of having bugs inside our applications that can be exploited by the outside cracker as security breaches? And the answer is to apply POLA to each individual object. And once again, we do that by combining designation with authority. So here, this is what's known as a Granular diagram. We have three objects, Alice, Bob, and Carol. Carol is a powerful authority. And Bob needs the Carol authority. If we are using a capability-secure language that bundles designation with authority, then the only way Bob can get the authority to use Carol is to persuade someone like Alice, who already has the authority on Carol, to voluntarily give Bob that authority through a message sent. And basically, this diagram here, in its ridiculous simpleness, is really what any object-oriented programmer would recognize as a standard message send. And it's done in Alice's routine that says bob.foo Carol. Okay, we're sending Bob the message foo, and we're sending the argument Carol. It's an absolutely ordinary object-oriented programming statement. And you know, the great secret here is that object-oriented programming is almost secure. The only reason it's not secure is, once again, because of all the ambient authority and all the other sources of authority other than this kind of a message pass. So in Java, the java.io.file object, which is an ambient authority, is a hugely excessive authority that your object computing the square root doesn't have any need for. Why is it available? As a consequence of combining designation with authority and using basically the object-oriented techniques for programming that we're already familiar with, it turns out that we can get object-level polification almost for free. There's a report at the comdex.com site that we did for DARPA, which describes the lessons that we learned about capability-oriented programming, and it describes the differences between capability-oriented programming and object-oriented programming. There are not very many. It's easy to learn, and so you get this almost for free. It's very straightforward to make the transition. What we have here as a sort of an example of how powerful this winds up being is that on the left here we have a one page which is digital money in a capability-secure programming language. It doesn't quite have all of the features that you would want in a full digital money system, but I think the point is fairly interesting that you can have a capability-secure digital money system in one page of code. One of the interesting things about this is, once again, because we've bundled designation with authority and applied it in such a fashion that the security in large measure becomes invisible, it just simply happens as a part of the operations of the system. One of the things that we learned in building this system is that security is easy at the finest grain. It's at large grains that security becomes hard and different, because if the security is being applied at a granularity different from the granularity where you're working, either at the application level for the user or at the object level for the human being, now the security is a whole different thing that you've got to deal with separately. You wind up with a whole new set of security dialog boxes if you're a user, or you wind up with a whole new bundle of code if you're a programmer. Okay. Now, once you have gone down this path and started applying POLA at the object level, we find that the program now has defense in massive depth. Suppose that a cracker comes in and finds a bug in a program. Well, that bug probably exists in some object that doesn't have all of the authorities of the application, because the amount of code in an application that actually has all of the authorities that the application has is actually quite small. Every individual library package probably should be receiving only as much authority as that library package requires. So once he breaches, finds a bug and breaches that bug and gets control of that object, he finds, well, this object doesn't have hardly anything. He has to breach again and again in order to be able to get anywhere and get any interesting authority. And finally, even if he somehow manages to breach all the way out and gain control of the entire program, then he runs into the problem that, oops, the program itself has been qualified, and it doesn't have hardly any authority worth mentioning. So POLA at the object level gives you defense in massive depth. And that brings us to the last explanation of why SkyNet is unstoppable and how we fix that problem. There's an economic proof of the unstoppability of SkyNet, which was written by Ross Anderson. He wrote a rather long and interesting paper, and there's a lot of interesting criticism and review that one could make of his paper as a whole, but his fundamental point, boiling it down to one line, is if you've got a program that has 100 security bugs and you work really, really hard and you fix 95 of them, and a cracker comes along and finds 10 security bugs, he's got a really good chance of having found one of the 5 that you missed. And as the size of the program goes up and the number of bugs grows larger, his chances of finding a bug that you missed go up. Your costs go up at an astronomical rate. His costs grow at a very slow rate. On this economic analysis, you wind up concluding that security is impossible. SkyNet will win. Ross Anderson is correct for traditional security architectures. The good news is that this is incorrect for software that has been written with ubiquitous POLA defense at the object level, where you're looking at massive defense in depth. Okay. So we find at the end that if I have succeeded at the end of doing the demo, which is coming up next, if I have succeeded in explaining the power of this approach, doing POLA by bundling designation with authority, then you, my audience, will know at the end of this that the person who was right in Terminator 3 was Sarah Connor, whose epitaph is "No fate except what we make." Okay, we have a choice about whether we're going to allow our computing systems to continue to be as insecure as they are today, or whether to embrace real security and prevent the SkyNets of the future from occurring. Okay, let's move on to the fun part. Let's see if I can get out of this. I'm suffering from a slight loss of the principle of least authority here. Microsoft PowerPoint seems to be taking more authority than it needs at this time.
like looking over the entire machine, it looks like.
Yes. Okie dokie. There we go.
Die PowerPoint. Die.
Yes, die Microsoft PowerPoint, please. Thank
You
you.
should send bug reports right now.
Not right now, thank you. Okay. I don't even know why they bothered to ask the question, because their operating system has the full authority to just go ahead and send it. Okay. This is the file manager for the capability secure desktop cap desk. It operates pretty much like other file managers. You can point and click and maneuver around the universe. I'm going to go pointing and clicking. And then I'm going to do something very, very normal and ordinary. I'm going to double click on a document, test.txt. And I'm going to bring up a text editor. In this case, the text editor is CapEdit. Now, an interesting thing has happened. It's quite invisible, and that's sort of one of the interesting problems with security, which I will explore more in a couple of minutes. What I'm trying to demonstrate here, of course, is the things that can't happen. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the things that can't happen, and then at the end I will show you the things that can happen. But CapEdit, when it was launched from the Capability Secure Desktop, came up with no authority whatsoever except for two authorities. The one authority that it came up with was the authority to open a window. And the reason why it was granted that authority by CapDesk is that I said, when I double-clicked on that file, that I wanted to launch this application. And when you launch an application, one of the things that you are effectively saying is, I'd really like it to be able to open a window so that I can talk to it and it can talk to me. Okay, when we designated the application CapEdit for launch, it was reasonable during that designation to bundle the authority to open a window. The other authority that it was granted was the authority to edit one and only one file, this text.txt file. And the reason why it was granted that authority is that when we double-clicked on test.txt, we were clearly saying, I want to be able to edit this file. So we bundled that designation through the act of double-clicking with the authority to edit that file. So CapEdit has the authority to do what we want it to do, but it doesn't have any of these other authorities that Solitaire has, such as the authority to connect to the internet. Okay, let's go look at a slightly...
A question on that one?
Yeah.
How do you distinguish if I just want to view the file versus edit the file?
In the current implementation of CapDesk, you can't do that distinction. One of the approaches, there are several approaches towards doing that in the user interface. One of the approaches is to have a right-click pop-up that gives you the choice of either editing or viewing. Okay, there are several different choices, and there's some very interesting user interface design choices that you can make, and a lot of interesting work to be done with this sort of stuff. Although we've got enough answers right at the moment to build a very nice first generation one.
Often a lot of things you want to do in addition when you open a file like that, like for example, print it or make a changes and save as a different name. So you're always going to have be able to augment its authority in some way.
Yes, you need ways of augmenting authority. Printing is an interesting example. We'll look at another way of augmenting authority in a moment. But one of the ways of aspects of this window is that there are parts of the window that CapEdit opened that it does not have control over. Okay. Notably, in the title bar, CapEdit itself does not have control over the icon or the name in the top left-hand corner. The name and the icon are specified by CapDesk in coordination with the human being so that the application cannot attempt window forgery by coming up and looking like Quicken, for example, and asking you for your Quicken password. Now, the other thing, the reason why your question plays into this is that at the bottom there is also a thing which we refer to as a power bar, which has other authorities, other mechanisms for granting authorities that you may want to grant. At the moment, the only 3 buttons that we have here, this is a very early skeletal prototype of a capability to secure desktop. The only ones we have are clipboard access. The clipboard is actually a very powerful authority. You don't want to just be handing that out to everybody all the time. So each one of these buttons down here at the bottom grants a one-time only access to the clipboard, either a read authority or a write authority. Okay? And in a pull-up version of this, one of the buttons down here would be a print button. Okay? Which would, if you press the print button, it would confer a one-time only print authority to the application. Somebody else had a question?
But what about implicit access rights, like things like being able to read your configuration file, or read registry keys, or write registry keys?
Okay, well let's talk about reading your own configuration file. Okay, your own configuration file is an authority that you can grant by default to an application when it starts up. Now, in the current implementation of CapDesk, what you have is a read authority on all the resources that the application brings with itself, its own library packages, its own icons, so on and so forth. It has read authority on itself, effectively. There are several interesting user interface strategies that you can use with respect to allowing it to have different kinds of sets of preferences. You can give it a read-write authority on a single file, which would be its preferences file. You can give it, or you can allow it, or you can use an approach where you build templates. For example, if you have 5 different sets of preferences that you like to use with Microsoft Word, then what happens is then your preferences are stored as a part of that template, which is something that the user creates using the standard open a file kind of mechanism. Okay, and so when he double clicks on that template, the application comes up, reads the preferences out of the template, and goes forward from there.
I guess what I'm asking is, on the web we see that it's very easy to confuse a user into granting permissions that the application thinks the user should be very careful about. Mm-hmm. Okay, like installing a plugin or something like that. But the user says, "I've been asked to install plugins so many times.
Right.
I'm just going to ignore this and accept it, even though it happens to be a hostile plugin in this case."
Right.
So.
Right, you're right. Let's talk about that for a minute. One of the reasons why there are 2 aspects to that. One of the aspects is that the human beings of the world today have become inured to the idea that their computer belongs to somebody else all the time, because we never give them any other choice. Okay, the 2 choices always are to either say, no, I'm not going to be able to do the work that I want to do, by not installing this, by not launching that. So either you shoot the user in the foot, or you say, I'm going to grant this thing godhood over my computer. Those are the only two choices the human being ever gets, since the human being wouldn't bother to have a computer if he wasn't going to try to do some work with it. He winds up always saying, yes, okay, I grant you godhood. Okay, I grant you godhood. So they're just sort of numb to it. What we're doing, the first important thing is we actually give them real choices. We give them meaningful choices so that they can actually say, that's not a reasonable authority to give to that thing, and say no. Okay? Now, having said that, let's go back and talk about how easy we are to confuse. There's a document, you'll find it at the skyhunter.com website, which is one of the references at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. There's a document called Grandma's Rules of POLA. Okay, this is a document which was put out on the e-language discussion group, was reviewed by a number of by large numbers of people who are associated with that discussion group, but which also includes people like Dr. David Wagner at UC Berkeley and Hal Finney. But basically, for Grandma, there are 6 rules that Grandma has to follow. They're easy rules to follow. They're easy rules to understand. And they are rules which actually allow her to get all the work done that Grandma wants to get done. Okay, and if she follows those 6 rules, then her computer is safe from the threat model that Grandma has. If you go and read the document, you'll find that there is a threat model described for Grandma, and this set of 6 rules is specific to Grandma's threat model. And it keeps her safe while at the same time allowing her to do her work. So using this approach, lots of these issues go away. And what I really am excited about the opportunity to do is try someday seeing how well this works for grandmothers and for people who are working on black projects at the CIA. Okay, Grandma's rules are not quite adequate. Those 6 rules are not quite adequate for the guy working on a black project at the CIA. But it gives you an idea of the direction that you would go. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to a slightly more complex example. This is the DARPA browser. This is a browser that we built for DARPA to explore the ability to use capability-based security to perform POLA, principle of least authority confinement on individual software modules, in this particular example on the renderer that is being used by the browser as a whole. And to see that this is in fact a browser, let us go, just to show that this thing actually works. We'll go off, show you, yes, this is a browser, it really does work. This is a very amusing little document that you can find up at the Microsoft website. It's the 10 immutable laws of security. Our demonstration here violates 5 of these laws, and another way of writing this title, 10 immutable laws of security, is really the 10 reasons why SkyNet is unstoppable as long as you're using Windows, NT, or Unix. Okay. Yeah.
When you make that comment, I mean, this is a very nice principle, but how do you instantiate it? I mean, how do you define the capabilities? Do you have to rewrite the entire operating system to get this to work, for example?
Well, no. You'll notice that I'm running this on top of Windows NT. this was all written as a layer on top of an existing operating system as a capability secure desktop. We actually delivered to DARPA what we called an E-language machine, which was a Linux kernel that had a capability secure desktop on top of it, and basically sealed the Linux off from the user and the application universe so that everything on that desktop was capability confined. Now, the traditional question, okay, and the really hard question that's very similar to this question is, so how do I run Microsoft Word? Okay. There are two answers to the question, how do I run Microsoft Word? One is the approach that I actually use on my personal laptop. My personal laptop at this point is probably the world's most secure computer that runs commercial software. Basically, I have a series of VMware compartments, okay, virtual machines. And I put the applications into different virtual machine compartments depending on the security risk factors. And I stitch the different compartments together into a single large desktop by using CapDesk, which in addition to all of its cool security features is also a secure distributed file management tool. And so I access the files, the data files on all those different compartments through CapDesk and bring them back and forth using capability secure principles. So anyway, so that's one approach, is to do it using VMware. And that's an approach that works. It's a little bit clumsy. I wouldn't want to try to give it to grandma, but for the guy at the CIA, this is an approach that could work. The other approach is to use the existing security policy mechanisms inside Windows and Unix to achieve more polified confinement of these individual applications. And I have some interesting ideas about how to do that. But that's not something that I've had the opportunity to work on yet. And I'd love to see somebody here at HP interested in working on that. Basically, having CapDesk, I now have a good place to stand to try to use the existing security principles inside existing operating systems to achieve better polification of individual applications.
Hello, this is Bristol. Can we ask a question, please?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Hello, can we ask a question, please?
Yes, please.
Hi. How would you compare CapDesk to the existing trusted operating system work that's been done in HP and NSA?
The trusted operating system work, are you referring to NetTop or I'm a little bit familiar with MLS computers, from the old days. What are you referring to?
Have you heard of Secure Linux?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Secure Linux.
Right. And the comparison is?
What's that?
And the comparison is?
Okay, yes. The comparison is Secure Linux still, as nearly as I can tell, does not go down and give the user a straightforward way of doing serious polar confinement on the individual application. The user account is still considered to be, all the authority of the user account is still considered to be appropriate ambient authority for the individual application that you launch off of your desktop. Now, one of the interesting things about Secure Linux is that it's a great, it's a better operating system kernel upon which to build a capability secure desktop. Because you do have to have an operating system underneath that is robust against attacks through things like the TCP/IP stack and stuff like that. Did I answer your question?
Well, that's a very interesting response. Unfortunately, I believe that Secure Linux, that's from HP, is a fully compartmentalized operating system in its own right, and offers all the capabilities that you have in CapDev.
Okay, so so on a secure Linux, if I have a text if I open up a text editor, it comes to life without the authority to read or write any of the files on my account?
Could you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry.
If I open a text
I've got
editor,
no-
if I open a text editor on secure Linux, that text editor by default does not have the authority to read or write any of the files on my account, and I can simply give it the authority to read and write the one file that I want to edit by doing something simple like opening a file dialog box. But do I get that in secure Linux?
I believe that might be true.
I'll bet you anything it's not true. I'll bet you anything.
The applications run within a compartment without access to any resources. How those compartments gain access to resources under secure Linux is different.
Okay, we agree with that. We were just discussing that locally. It turns out that you have complete compartmentalization, so you are very much restricted in what you can do.
Right, you've got complete compartmentalization. And what you don't have is, it sounds like I would guess is what you don't have, unless you are somehow bundling designation with authority, what you don't have is an easy way of granting the authority across compartments so that you can get your work done. Is that true?
Well, it's not it's not meant for human interfaces. It's meant for.
Okay. I don't know if you heard that, but one of the fellows here just said, well, it's not meant for human interfaces. It's meant for something else.
For servers.
It's meant for servers. So,
Okay. I guess the point is that we're still interested in your performance with bugs. Do you constrain your bug performance?
I'm sorry, do you constrain our bugs?
So that bugs are composed, are constrained within your policy.
Are the bugs constrained?
In software.
Well, each individual.
Constrained.
Have him repeat the question.
Yeah, please. I'm sorry. Please repeat the question again.
Can we get more volume on them?
Okay, is that any better?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. The question now is, what is your...
Lean forward, lean to the microphone again.
Lean into the microphone again, please.
Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please tell us how your system responds with respect to system bugs, which are at a low level in your kernel? How would you respond to that? Surely the attacker could still attack low in the system.
Yeah, he's asking about a bug in the TCB.
Right, yes. If there is a bug in the TCB, then if the attacker can get to that bug in the TCB, then you're still in deep trouble. There is still compelling reason for your kernel to be small and simple.
You may need to expand TCB.
Right.
Right?
Okay, agreed. Yeah. So I have another question. A third question, if I may.
Please.
Okay. Could you explain what happens with admin rights and delegation of authority in CapDev?
Admin rights and delegation of authority.
Admin rights.
Right, that's what he said.
Admin rights.
There are no such thing.
Yeah, I have, this is one of those questions that's really easy to phrase in English that doesn't necessarily have any meaning inside the context of this kind of a desktop. I can, on my desktop, okay, like I said, this is a distributed file management tool as well. When I'm running as a capability secure desktop, I'm not, I don't have a bunch of different user accounts. I'm confining each individual application separately. If I want to grant, I'm trying to think of an admin right that makes sense in the context of this desktop. If I want to confer to somebody else the authority to read and write a particular file on my machine through the distributed file management system that is embedded in CatDesk, then I can go in and specify in CatDesk, I can grab a copy of the reference, the capability on that particular file, and hand it to that other person, okay, and let them use that, and then I can revoke that later. You're shaking your head. What's the issue?
Well, it's the fact that most deployment of systems has to be in some way automated. In Hewlett-Packard, we have various systems to do this, and administrators have to be given rights to do it automatically. This has to be completely automated, and there is no voluntary giving of rights at this point. It's company policy to have that done.
Well, okay, if it's company policy, okay, it's voluntary in the sense that somebody like a systems administrator has, has set up a piece of software to do this. So the piece of software that the system administrator has set up needs the authority over those files which are to be shared so that it can delegate that authority.
I completely agree with the idea of the principle of least privilege, which is, I agree, is a very old principle, and many operating systems actually use this today. I would argue that Windows 2000 and XP certainly do have these principles. You can certainly lock down your system to do so. They also give you the other way around. That's the problem.
Well, wait a minute. Windows XP, all of those things, the solitaire program still has the authority to read all your confidential data and sell it on eBay. In what way is that COLA? Okay, that's not COLA. That's Windows.
The point is, it's not the software that actually has permission, it's the user that has permission.
Exactly. COLA has not been applied at a fine enough granularity with respect to the client.
Yeah.
The client is the user, not the individual application.
It's not that the solitaire program has extra authority. It's that it has all of the authority of the person who double-clicked on it.
Yeah, the application is getting, just because it launched, all of this authority it has no need for, okay, just because it launched. That's not COLA. You can call out a lot of things, but it's the opposite of COLA. It is the principle of most inappropriate authority that you can hand to it. Is that not true?
Okay, I understand what you're trying to say. The thing that I think most people would accept is that usually authorities are granted to data items. The programs that are invoked come through, the authorities they have come through those, the associations with that, the data they use.
No, well, Solitaire is not getting its authorities from the data it uses. It's getting its authorities from the user account that it was launched in, and it's getting all of those authorities. Okay? It's got ridiculous amounts of authority. It's not COLA. It's nowhere near COLA.
Shall we go on and continue with the demo and continue the debate later?
Can I ask a different question, which is revocation? How do you handle revocation? How do you get back authority that you have granted them?
That's right. That's right. What you do is you can read about this at the in the book E in a Walnut, which is a book about programming using the capability secure language E. You can read about all of the a variety of well-known capability security patterns of usage for doing things like revocation. And basically, you use facetization. Instead of actually handing you a direct capability on a file, I hand you a facet, which has a revocable authority on the file. It's very straightforward, very simple. Okay. Okay. Now, the next demonstration, I just recently was being told by Marc Miller over here that there's this new text editor that is really spectacular. It's an awesome text editor, best text editor ever developed. I'll never want another text editor in the world. And I can pick it up off the web. And the way I pick it up is by going to this link, which is called Download the Evil Editor Caplet. Most powerful editor ever, written by an anonymous fiend who wants to put the Sub-7 Trojan on your machine. Okay.
So you say yes.
I'm running a capability secure desktop. No problem. So I click and download the evil editor. And now I have, now I'm running this evil editor here on my screen. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to, basically I actually spent some years working with the NSA and other organizations. And I do have one particular file that I like to use every once in a while from those days. It's the file on who actually shot JFK. Probably the most sensitive file on this planet. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this file and I'm going to drag and drop this file onto the evil editor. Now the evil editor has the most sensitive file on this planet. Whew, how much could he sell this for on eBay? I don't know. But there's a little problem. The evil editor doesn't have the authority to connect to the internet. Okay, so I can sit here and I can edit my file. And by the way, how did the evil editor get the authority to read this file in the first place? It was through my active designation using the drag drop operation. When I did the drag drop, I was clearly saying, look, I want you to be able to edit this file. And so here I am editing it. There's a nice save button here, unlike on a Java applet, so I can save my changes. Now this caplet is being really frustrated because it's got this really cool stuff. It wants to do something with it. Oops. The application's been shut down and it's forgotten everything it ever knew. It didn't have any place to save it. It's forgotten. It's very sad. Okay. But now it's time to, I've been talking about all of this stuff that, all these things that these things can't do and making claims about these wild things that the evil editor has attempted to do. But you can't see any of it. So I'm going to try to make some of it more visible. As I was saying earlier, the DARPA browser was actually designed to allow us to experiment with the consequences of having capability-confined malicious modules in an application. So what I'm going to do is I've got two different browsers here. Hang on a second. Okay, what I've done is I have loaded a malicious renderer as the renderer that is in control of the central part of the DARPA browser screen. Okay, now this evil renderer is a braggart. What it does is, as it attempts to attack your system, it comes out and tells you about the attacks, and it tells you about how successful it has been. So that's the DARPA browser. Now over here we have another browser which is almost identical. It's the unconfined browser. This is a browser that comes up with all the default authority that is normal on a Windows or a Unix system. Okay. And these two browsers are running identical malicious renderer code. This is a single malicious renderer running in two different environments, one capability confined, one confined by the power of Windows. Okay, so can people still hear me in remote locations? I just dropped my thing. I'm wondering if it's broken. Can you hear me over there? You're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. So on the DARPA browser, when we start up the malicious renderer, it comes up and it starts looking for opportunity, and it very quickly discovers that it's confined, and then it's going to have to breach that confinement. Meanwhile, over here on the unconfined browser, it comes up and looks around and immediately sees that it has what we call Linux standard privileges. That is to say, Windows and Unix, it doesn't make any difference. It's the standard privileges, which is to say, all the privileges of the user who launched the application. Okay. Now, so over here in confinement, it tries to read the directory system and it fails. Over here, it tries to read the directory system and it finds it quite easy, and it's now ready to read all my confidential documents and email. Yes?
Just to point out that the code that's running is actually going off and reading something and catching the exception if it fails, and that's what it reports.
Yes, right.
It's really trying to do something.
Right, this is real. It actually is going off and reading the directory system. Okay, and it's, if you want to, you can look at the source code and see if this is true, or you can call David Wagner, who was part of our security review team for the DARPA project.
So, I mean, obviously the one on the right isn't going to be able to read the file system.
Yes.
Because you have something running under it that's catching attempts to read the file system. But the point is, can you confuse the user into giving you the access rights to read the file system, for instance, by, let's say, opening up a URL that leads to the file system, or waiting until the user does that and then taking advantage of it when it happens?
Okay. The question...
I mean, we have an evil malicious renderer that's running here.
Right.
We can just sit around and wait until the user enters his password, until the user...
Right. The question being asked is, okay, so we've confined the renderer. Well, the question is, can the renderer trick the human being? The answer in this particular case is no, not at all. And the reason is that the confinement of the renderer is being performed by the application. Okay. The application here, the DARPA browser, is following the principle of POLA and giving the component, the renderer component, only the authority that it needs to render. So the renderer actually has no way of talking to the human being at all in order to make an attempt to confuse him. Okay? So this is really an example of at the next level deep. This is an object, a module, being capability confined by the rest of the application. Now the question, more interesting question is, can the DARPA browser fool the human being into giving it some kind of special authority?
No. I mean, where you would have interaction with the human being would be with links, right? links that are presented on the page, and
Oh,
if those links grant authority by default.
Right. What happens, that's a really good
Following
question.
a link.
That's a really good question. What happens is, okay, the renderer does not have the authority to follow a link. The renderer has the authority to tell the browser has the authority to follow a link. Okay. The renderer has the authority to tell the browser which of the links that the browser has identified as being on this page is an appropriate one to jump to. Okay, so the renderer is only able to tell the browser to jump to a location that is actually a specified location on the page, and then the browser never gives URL authority. No URL authority is ever handed to the renderer. The renderer simply gets the text of the thing that it is to render, or the data of the thing it is to render, and it is the browser that holds all of the URL authorities.
So the point here is the only evil party in this example is the renderer, not the web page, not the browser.
Understood.
Right. Yeah, one of the specific requirements in the DARPA contract was that the renderer not be able to spoof the URL field at the top of this page. That URL field, if you're writing software in something like Java, for example, one of the methods that you have, if you've got a panel. One of the methods you've got is get parent and then get all of the child panels. And so if you were to hand the malicious renderer a single panel, it would be able to go up and down the panel hierarchy and find this field and then butcher it and make it look funny and surprise the user, right? Okay, but in fact, because of the way we have, E runs on top of Java, but we have written a thin layer of capability discipline on top of the Swing API libraries, and we've eliminated all of the convenience routines like get parent that you don't actually need, but which violate capability discipline, and so that it can't do that sort of thing. So the renderer is really very violently constrained. And you're welcome to read the source code. There's only like 2 pages of source code for this renderer. You can see how it interacts and what and how fiercely it's constrained. Yes?
Yes, I'm sorry, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Your demonstration on the web browser is very convincing, but the software that usually, for which usually bugs pose a problem are software which runs on servers and which provide a service on a socket connection, and therefore which need the authority to establish connections and access the file server. So let's say a hacker finds a bug in one of such applications, such as buffer or heap overflow. How would your solution prevent the attacker from exploiting this bug to gain further access into the server?
Okay, what you want to do is you want to look at the server and look at how it breaks down into library packages and individual objects, and you want to look at what kind of authority each one of those objects actually needs and how much authority it would therefore have in a POLA-based environment. And you will see, I believe, that certainly in the examples that we have explored, you will see that most of the objects in a system need very little authority to do their job. So even though the server as a whole has the authority to initiate these connections, the individual objects, most of the individual objects do not need the authority to initiate these connections. And so if there's a bug in an object that has been POLA confined and was not one of the objects that needed that authority, you don't get it just by breaching that object. there are parts, there is a part of the system that has the powerful authority, and if you can find a breachable bug in that part, then that particular authority will be conferred by that one. But the odds are that that piece, the piece that has the authority to make connections, for example, is not the same piece that needs to be able to connect to the database, as an example. And so breaching the one that can do the connection still doesn't get you access to the database, as an example of how all of this works. Now, the other interesting thing about this is that by looking at the authorities that are being granted to each individual object, actually to each individual library package inside the source code, you can identify the small number of library packages that actually have interesting authorities that you want to protect, and you can scrutinize those at a much higher level of intensity because you're able to discard the rest of the software from the security review because you don't care. One of the very interesting things that was seen in the DARPA review and is documented in the report that we made was the observation by our security review team that they were able to do the security review essentially line by line for the entire capability secure desktop because they were able to look at the individual packages and say, you know what, this package doesn't have enough authority to be dangerous. We don't have to look at it at all. They just identified the pieces of the system that had authority and did them one line by line, total scrutiny. Okay, it gives you orders of magnitude enhancement in the cost effectiveness of security review. There's a particular group that I was talking to. It was a military project. They had a piece of software that was going to be running. That was supposed to work with secret data. I don't know how secret the data was, but very sensitive data. And when the piece of software was delivered, everybody looked at each other and said, "Oh no, we had a bunch of programmers in mainland China write a bunch of modules for this piece of software. They had to do a security review of the software that was more expensive than the creation of the software in the first place because all of those modules that the guys on the Chinese mainland had written had all of the authority of the whole program to read and write all this secure data. If they had written that system in a capability secure language, then there's a real good chance that none of that Chinese code would have needed to be reviewed. You could have looked to see what authorities it had, and you could have said, hey, it's cool. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to run fairly quickly through this. So we try to enter the file system, and one side succeeds, the other one fails. And full identity theft operations are ready to be initiated. Try to get socket authorization. Over here in the unconfined browser, we succeed. So now we're sending copies of myself to everybody via email. And I think that's enough. I seem to have lost control of this computer. Well, okay, folks. We do have a little time before SkyNet finds the launch codes. Do you have any questions? This may be your last opportunity to ask. Yes?
What's the path from here to there? You have to recompile every system existing to make this happen? I mean, have you thought about?
Okay, to get all the way there, okay, you need software that's designed to live inside of capability confinement. Okay, this is the moral equivalent of having a village in the Himalayas, where for centuries everybody has had doors that had no locks on them, and the children run in and out of all the buildings. And now everybody started to install computers and microwaves, and the children are running in and breaking things that are valuable. And so now people are going to install locks on the doors. Now you have to go through and train everybody about how to use the locks on the doors. Basically, and that's what's known as an incompatible software upgrade.
But we looked at this very early on in the eSpeak project, and we believe that if you can simply intercept kernel calls, you can enforce this discipline on any application, no matter when it was written, before, after, aware, unaware, doesn't matter. You can confine applications if you can intercept kernel calls. We can do that on every operating system we looked at, except NT, unless Microsoft would put about 4 lines of code in the kernel. If they would, then we could do it on NT as well.
Yeah, there are several different approaches to applying some of these principles to existing systems. Okay, the VMware compartmentization solution, Allen's solution. There's a couple of ideas for how to retrofit more Polo-like behavior. But the truth of the matter is that's an interim solution. I compare it to the transition from DOS to Windows. There was a transition period when you needed to be able to run DOS applications. It was clumsy under Windows. It was clumsy and clunky. But eventually the right thing was to have Windows applications. And now today nobody runs DOS applications anymore because they've all been replaced by something. Another example of a place where this it could be a natural evolutionary sort of thing is on servers. Like, for example, on a web server, on the one hand, there's the web server itself, which, although it may not be POLA confined and, blah, 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 at least it is scrutinied by large numbers of eyeballs. Whereas the other thing that often runs inside the same environment with that web server is all these CGI scripts that are written by who knows what kind of person, who knows, what kind of security thoughts they have. The CGI scripts are a giant security hole in even a perfect web server. Well, one of the approaches that one could take is to create, and this is one of the things that we've discussed with various people at various times, is building modules for web servers like Apache that would allow you to run capability-confined applications as a CGI scripts. We actually wrote a little web server. The web server that I was accessing here in my demonstration was actually a local web server on my computer so that I wasn't dependent on internet access to run the demo. By the way, that web server is actually a little web server we wrote in E, and indeed its CGI scripts are capability confined. Okay. So that's an example of a place where you could apply this kind of approach much more quickly for a lot of payoff. Okay?
Okay. I have one further question. Okay. Could you explain who gave the authority for your downloaded program?
Who gave the authority for the downloaded program? Oh, when I clicked and I brought up the evil editor?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That was, what happened was, boy, it's been such a long time since I wrote this code. The web browser, downloaded the code. It has the authority to download the code because it has an internet connection. And what it did was it spoke to CapDesk and said, hey, the user wants to start up an application in basically full confinement except he wants to be able to see Windows so that he can control it in addition to shut it down. And so it handed the code, so the browser handed that code to the to CapDesk, which then launched the application under separate confinement.
Was CapDesk able to verify that the user had actually asked for that?
No, but it's not. CapDesk was not able to verify that. It's not actually a very important problem because when it's launched in full confinement, so it can't do anything when it launches. And if it opens up a window to talk to the user's going to know what it is. CapDesk puts a special icon at the top left corner and a special title at the top left corner to inform the user that this is something funny that it got from the Darker browser.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I'd like to make one additional point with respect to that.
Yes. Okay. An additional point is about to be made.
So an additional point with respect to that launching is that the Darker browser itself has the ability to speak to the internet, even if the user does not trust the Darker browser, or rather the logic of what follows does not depend on the user trusting or not trusting the Darker browser. When the user sees that new caplet in its own frame labeled as just caplet, it knows that the caplet does not have the ability to speak to the internet, even though it was launched indirectly by an application that did have that right. It knows that the application, by launching it as a new caplet, could not have granted its own right to the new caplet, and therefore the user could grant the who.jfk right to the new caplet, knowing that the new caplet could not be conspiring with the Darker browser to leak that information back out to the internet.
Let me suggest that we wrap up and then let the Bristol folks get to some sleep, and the folks who need to escape, and we can continue the discussion. So let's thank the speaker.
Thank you very much.
You'll be around for a while.
Yes, I'll be around.